Maya Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead as she pushed the heavy cleaning cart down the long hallway of Harmony Conservatory. The wheels squeaked loudly against the polished marble floor, echoing through the empty corridor. It was 6 p.m., and most of the students had already gone home to their fancy houses and expensive cars. But for Maya and her mother, this was when their real work began. Her mother, Lin Chen, had been working as a cleaner at this prestigious music school for almost 5 years now. Every evening, they would come together to clean the practice rooms, classrooms, and concert halls. Maya didn't mind helping her mother. They needed the extra money, and it meant she could stay close to the one thing that made her heart sing: music. As Maya cleaned the windows in the main hallway, she could hear faint sounds coming from the practice rooms. Someone was still here playing piano. The melody was beautiful, flowing like water through the quiet building. She stopped cleaning and closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. Her fingers began to move on their own, as if they were pressing invisible keys in the air. "Maya, come help me with this room," her mother called from down the hall. Maya quickly grabbed her cleaning supplies and hurried to help. They were cleaning one of the smaller practice rooms now. This room had a beautiful black piano sitting in the center, its surface gleaming under the soft lights. Maya had cleaned this room hundreds of times, but she never got tired of looking at that piano. "Mama, do you think I could ever learn to play?" Maya asked quietly as she dusted the piano bench. Her mother paused from wiping down the mirrors and looked at her daughter with sad eyes. "Yeah, Maya. You know we cannot afford such things. These lessons cost more money than we make in 3 months. And look at these students. They come from rich families. They have been playing since they were tiny children." Maya nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the piano keys. She had been coming here for 2 years now, and every day she watched the students through the small windows in the practice room doors. Some of them played with such ease, their fingers dancing across the keys like it was the most natural thing in the world. Others struggled and made mistakes, getting frustrated and starting over again and again. But Maya noticed something else too. She could tell when someone was playing with real feeling and when they were just going through the motions. Some of the richest students, the ones with the fanciest clothes and most expensive instruments, played perfectly, but somehow their music felt cold and empty. Others, fewer in number, played with such passion that it made Maya's chest feel tight with emotion. After her mother finished the mirrors, she moved on to the next room. Maya was supposed to follow, but something made her stay. She looked around quickly to make sure no one was watching, then slowly approached the piano. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. She had never touched a real piano before. The closest she had come was pressing the keys on an old electronic keyboard at a garage sale. But the family selling it had quickly shooed her away when they saw her worn clothes and realized she wasn't a serious buyer. Maya reached out one finger and gently pressed a white key. The sound that came out was pure and clear, much richer than she had expected. She pressed another key, then another. Soon she was picking out a simple melody she had heard one of the students practicing earlier that day. She didn't know the proper way to hold her hands or which fingers to use for which keys. Everything she did was based on what felt natural and what she had observed from watching countless students through those practice room windows. But somehow, the melody that came from her fingers sounded right. "What are you doing?" Maya spun around, her heart nearly stopping. A security guard was standing in the doorway, frowning at her. "I'm sorry, I was just cleaning," Maya stammered, quickly moving away from the piano. The guard looked at her suspiciously. This room was supposed to be cleaned an hour ago, and students aren't allowed in here after hours. "I'm not a student. Sir, I'm helping my mother clean. She's Mrs. Chen, she works here." The guard's expression softened slightly. "Oh, you're Lin's daughter. Well, just stick to cleaning, okay? These instruments are worth more than most people's cars." Maya nodded quickly and grabbed her dusting cloth, pretending to clean the piano bench. The guard watched her for a few more seconds, then moved on to check the other rooms. When Maya was sure he was gone, she let out a long breath. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. The feeling of pressing those keys, of creating that beautiful sound, had awakened something inside her that she didn't even know existed. From that night forward, Maya began to listen more carefully. to the music floating through the conservatory. She started to recognize different pieces and could often tell which student was playing just by their style. During her lunch breaks at school, instead of eating with friends, she would go to the library and check out books about music and famous pianists. She learned about composers like Chopin and Mozart, about different types of music from classical to jazz. She read about musicians who had grown up poor but had somehow made it to the biggest concert halls in the world. These stories gave her hope, even though they seemed like fairy tales. 3 weeks after her first encounter with the piano, Maya found herself alone in the practice room again. This time she was more careful. She had learned the security guard's schedule and knew exactly when it was safe to explore. She sat down on the piano bench properly this time, adjusting the height the way she had seen students do. She placed her hands on the keys and tried to remember the finger positions she had observed. Slowly, she began to play a melody that had been stuck in her head for days. It was a simple piece, something a beginner student had been practicing over and over. But when Maya played it, she added little changes here and there, making it sound more emotional, more personal. She didn't know that what she was doing was called interpretation, or that it was something that took most musicians years to develop. As the weeks passed, Maya became bolder. She started staying later, sometimes until 8 or 9 p.m., long after her mother had finished cleaning the administrative offices. Her mother thought she was studying in the library, and Maya didn't correct her. It wasn't exactly a lie. She was learning, just not in the way her mother imagined. Maya taught herself to play by listening and copying. She would stand outside practice rooms and memorize pieces, then go to an empty room and figure out how to play them. Her fingers were getting stronger, and she was beginning to understand how the keys related to each other, how certain combinations created harmony while others created tension. She made mistakes, lots of them. Sometimes she would press the wrong key and wince at the harsh sound, but she was learning from each mistake, developing her own way of understanding music that was different from the formal methods taught in the classrooms. One evening, while practicing a particularly challenging piece she had heard an advanced student play, Maya became so absorbed in the music that she forgot to keep track of time. The melody was sad and beautiful, telling a story of loss and hope that seemed to match her own life perfectly. She was so focused on getting the emotional expression right that she didn't notice she was no longer alone. Through the small window in the practice room door, someone was watching her with very keen and surprised eyes. Maya finished the piece and sat quietly for a moment, her hands still resting on the keys. She felt something she had never experienced before, a sense of completion, as if she had found the thing she was meant to do with her life. But as she prepared to leave, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Panic shot through her as she realized how late it must be. She quickly closed the piano cover and grabbed her cleaning supplies, trying to look busy. The footsteps passed by without stopping, and Maya breathed a sigh of relief. But she didn't know that her secret was no longer safe, and that tomorrow would bring a confrontation that would change everything. The next evening started like any other. Maya and her mother arrived at the conservatory at their usual time, 6 p.m. sharp. Maya had been thinking about the beautiful piece she had practiced the night before, and her fingers were itching to touch the piano keys again. "I'll start with the practice rooms on the 3rd floor tonight," Maya told her mother as they unloaded their cleaning supplies. Her mother nodded, already focused on organizing her cart. "Be careful with the instruments and don't take too long. I want to finish early tonight." Maya climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her heart beating with anticipation. She had been working on a new piece for the past week, something she had heard during one of the advanced classes. It was more complicated than anything she had attempted before, but she was determined to master it. She checked the hallway carefully before slipping into practice room 3B, her favorite because it had the best piano and was located away from the main traffic areas. Maya set down her cleaning supplies and approached the beautiful black piano. As she lifted the cover and sat down on the bench, she felt that familiar surge of excitement. This was her secret world, the only place where she felt truly herself. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The melody started softly, almost like a whisper. Maya had been practicing this piece in her head all day at school, imagining how each note should sound, how her fingers should move. As she played, she became completely absorbed in the music, letting it carry her away from thoughts of homework, money problems, and the feeling of not quite fitting in anywhere. She was so focused on the difficult passage in the middle of the piece that she didn't hear the practice room door open behind her. Oh my goodness, what is that supposed to be? Maya's hands froze on the keys. Her blood turned to ice as she slowly turned around. Standing in the doorway were 5 students from the conservatory's most elite program. Maya recognized them immediately. They were the ones who always wore expensive clothes, carried designer bags, and talked loudly about their private lessons with famous teachers. The girl in front, Victoria Sterling, was smirking at Maya with a look of pure amusement. Victoria was everything Maya was not: tall, confident, perfectly dressed, and the daughter of a world-famous pianist. She had long blonde hair that always looked like she had just stepped out of a salon, and she wore jewelry that probably cost more than Maya's family made in a year. "I'm sorry," Maya stammered, starting to stand up from the piano bench. "I was just cleaning and I—" "Cleaning?" Victoria interrupted, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Is that what you call it? Because it sounded more like you were torturing this poor piano." The other students laughed, and Maya felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She recognized them all: Brandon, whose father owned a record label; Ashley, who had been featured in classical music magazines; David, who had won multiple youth competitions; and Catherine, who came from a family of professional musicians. "Seriously, though," Victoria continued, pulling out her phone, "this is too good not to share. Everyone needs to see this." "Please don't," Maya said quietly. But Victoria was already recording. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria announced to her phone camera, "we have discovered a new musical talent here at Harmony Conservatory. Apparently, the cleaning staff thinks they can just waltz in here and play our pianos." Maya felt sick to her stomach. She tried to move toward the door, but the students were blocking her path. Wait, Victoria said, still recording. "Don't be shy. Play some more for us. Show everyone what you've learned from—" "Where exactly did you learn to play? YouTube?" I taught myself," Maya whispered, barely audible. This caused another eruption of laughter. "She taught herself," Brandon repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. "That explains so much." "The finger position alone is giving me second-hand embarrassment," Ashley added, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "My teacher would have a heart attack if she saw that technique." Victoria zoomed in on Maya's hands, which were shaking now. "Look at those calluses. I guess that's what happens when you're more used to holding a mop than sitting at a piano." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she tried desperately not to cry in front of them. She had never felt so small, so out of place, so ashamed of who she was. "This is honestly the most entertaining thing that's happened all week," Victoria continued, still recording. "Wait until I post this online. Local cleaning girl thinks she's the next Mozart. This is going to get so many views. Maybe we should start a GoFundMe for her piano lessons," David suggested with fake concern, "though I'm not sure any teacher would want to work with this." "Actually," Victoria said, her eyes lighting up with a cruel idea, "why don't you play something for us right now? Since you're so confident in your abilities, go ahead, give us a little concert." Maya shook her head, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "Please just let me go. I need to get back to work." "Oh, but this is entertainment," Victoria laughed. "Come on, don't be modest. You were playing so beautifully when we walked in. What was that piece supposed to be anyway?" It was Chopin," Maya managed to say. The laughter that followed was the loudest yet. "Chopin," Catherine gasped between giggles. "She thinks she was playing Chopin." "Honey," Victoria said in a condescending tone, "what you were playing might have had the same number of notes as Chopin, but that's where the similarity ended. Chopin is rolling over in his grave right now." Maya finally pushed past them and ran toward the door, but Victoria's voice followed her. "Don't worry, I'll make sure everyone sees this video. You're going to be famous." Maya ran down the hallway, not caring who heard her footsteps or saw her crying. She found her mother in one of the classrooms and tried to compose herself, but Lin Chen immediately knew something was wrong. "Maya, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Nothing, Mama, I want to go home." But Maya knew it wasn't nothing. As she helped her mother finish the cleaning, her phone started buzzing with notifications. Victoria had already posted the video to her social media accounts, and it was spreading fast. By the time Maya got home that night, the video had been shared dozens of times. The comments were even worse than Victoria's original taunts. People were calling her delusional, laughable, pathetic. Someone had even figured out who she was and where she went to school. Maya lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and feeling like her world had crashed down around her. The one thing that had brought her joy, the secret dream that had kept her going through difficult times, had been turned into a source of public humiliation. She had never felt so alone, so stupid for believing that someone like her could ever belong in a world like that. The beautiful music that had lived in her heart for months now felt tainted, ruined by the laughter and cruelty of those students. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maya made a decision. She would never touch a piano again. Some dreams, she realized, were meant to stay dreams. And some worlds were meant to keep people like her on the outside, looking in through windows but never allowed to enter. The next few days at school were torture. Other students had seen the video, and Maya had to endure whispers and giggles as she walked through the hallways. Even some teachers seemed to look at her differently, with a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment. Maya stopped going to the library during lunch. She stopped reading about music and famous pianists. And most importantly, when she went to the conservatory with her mother, she avoided the practice rooms entirely, focusing only on cleaning the administrative offices and common areas. Her mother noticed the change but didn't push for explanations. Maya was grateful for that. She didn't think she could bear to tell her mother about her foolish dreams and how spectacularly they had been crushed. But what Maya didn't know was that someone else had been watching that night. Someone who had seen the entire confrontation and had a very different opinion about what had happened in Practice Room 3B. Professor Elena Volkov had been teaching at Harmony Conservatory for 15 years, and in all that time, she had never seen anything quite like what she witnessed that terrible evening in Practice Room 3B. Elena was known throughout the conservatory as the most demanding teacher, the one who could make even the most confident students nervous with a single glance. She had trained under some of the world's greatest pianists and had performed in concert halls across Europe before deciding to dedicate her life to teaching. Students either loved her or feared her, but all of them respected her. That night, Elena had been working late in her office, reviewing applications for the upcoming summer intensive program. As she walked down the hallway toward the parking lot, she heard piano music coming from one of the practice rooms. This wasn't unusual. Students often practiced late into the evening. But something about this particular music made her stop and listen. The piece being played was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of her personal favorites, but it wasn't being played the way she usually heard it from her students. This version had something different, and raw emotional quality that most classically trained pianists took years to develop, if they ever developed it at all. Elena quietly approached the practice room and looked through the small window. What she saw surprised her completely. The person playing was not one of her students, but a young girl she had seen around the building, the daughter of one of the cleaning staff. Elena watched carefully as the girl played. Her technique was far from perfect. Her posture wasn't ideal, her fingering was unconventional, and she was making small mistakes that any of Elena's first-year students would have avoided. But despite all of this, the music she was creating was extraordinarily beautiful. Elena had taught hundreds of students over the years. Many of them had perfect technique, could play the most difficult pieces flawlessly, and had been training since they were small children. But very few of them could make music that touched the soul the way this untrained girl was doing right now. Elena was still watching when Victoria Sterling and her group of friends arrived and began their cruel performance. Elena's jaw tightened as she witnessed the humiliation they put the poor girl through. She had always disliked Victoria's arrogant attitude, but this display of cruelty made her truly angry. After the girl ran away and the students left, Elena remained in the hallway thinking. She had seen natural talent before, but nothing quite like this. This girl had somehow developed musical instincts that couldn't be taught in any classroom. More importantly, she played with genuine passion, something that was becoming increasingly rare in the world of classical music. Elena spent the next few days discreetly observing. She learned that the girl's name was Maya Chen, that she was 16 years old, and that she had no formal musical training whatsoever. Elena also noticed that after the incident with Victoria, Maya seemed to avoid the practice rooms entirely. This concerned Elena greatly. She had seen too many talented young people give up on music because of discouragement or lack of opportunity. She couldn't let that happen to Maya, not when the girl possessed something so rare and precious. On a Thursday evening, about a week after the incident, Elena positioned herself in the hallway where she knew Maya would pass while helping her. "Mother clean." She had rehearsed what she would say, but when the moment came, she found herself feeling almost nervous. It had been years since she had approached a student directly, rather than waiting for them to come to her. Maya was pushing a cleaning cart down the hallway, her head down, moving efficiently from room to room. She looked smaller somehow, as if she had folded in on herself. "Excuse me," Elena called out softly. Maya looked up, startled. When she saw Elena standing there, her eyes widened with fear. Elena realized that Maya probably recognized her as one of the teachers and was worried about getting in trouble. "You're Maya, aren't you?" Elena asked gently. "I'm Professor Volkov." Maya nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. She had heard the other students talk about Professor Volkov in hushed, respectful tones. What could someone like her possibly want with Maya? "I was wondering if we could talk for a few minutes," Elena continued. "About music." Maya's face went pale. I don't know anything about music, Professor. I think you have me confused with someone else." Elena studied Maya's face carefully. She could see the fear there, but also something else. A deep sadness, as if something precious had been taken away from her. "I heard you playing last week," Elena said quietly. "In practice room 3B. Maya's shoulders sagged and she looked like she might cry. "I'm sorry. I know I wasn't supposed to touch the piano. It won't happen again." "I'm not here to scold you," Elena said quickly. "I'm here because of what I heard when you were playing." Maya looked confused. "I don't understand." Elena took a step closer. "What I heard was extraordinary. You have a natural musical ability that I rarely encounter, even among my most advanced students." Maya stared at her in disbelief. But I don't know how to read music. I don't know proper technique. You just play from the heart," Elena finished. "And that, Maya, is the most important thing of all. Everything else can be taught." Maya shook her head. "I can't afford lessons, Professor. My family doesn't have that kind of money." "I'm not talking about traditional lessons," Elena said. "I'm talking about something different, something that would be just between you and me." Maya looked around, nervously, as if she expected Victoria and her friends to jump out from behind a corner and start laughing again. Elena noticed her anxiety. "I also saw what happened that night. What those students did to you was cruel and completely inappropriate." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "They were right, though. I don't belong here. I was stupid to think I could ever—" "They were wrong," Elena interrupted firmly. "They were completely, utterly wrong. Yes, your technique needs work. Yes, you need to learn music theory and proper fingering. But Maya, you have something that can't be taught. Genuine musical intuition and the ability to make people feel something when you play." Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Even if that's true, it doesn't matter. I can't afford to take classes here." "What if I told you that didn't matter?" Elena asked. "What if I told you I wanted to teach you myself privately at no cost?" Maya's mouth fell open. "Why would you do that?" Elena thought for a moment before answering. "Because 25 years ago I was a lot like you. I grew up in a small village in Russia where my family had very little money. I taught myself to play on an old broken piano in the church basement. When I finally got the chance to study properly, my teacher saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She changed my life. Maya was quiet for a long time, processing what Elena had just told her. But what about those other students? They'll just make fun of me more if they find out. They don't need to know, Elena said. This would be our secret until you're ready. We would meet early in the mornings before anyone else arrives or late in the evenings after everyone has gone home. Maya looked torn between hope and fear. What if I'm not good enough? What if I disappoint you? Elena smiled for the first time since their conversation began. Maya, I've been teaching for 15 years. I can tell the difference between someone who has potential and someone who doesn't. You not only have potential, you have something special. Maya was quiet again and Elena could see her internal struggle. Finally, Maya spoke in a small voice. If I said yes, where would we start? We would start with the basics, Elena explained. Proper posture, hand position, scales, music theory. It won't be easy. In fact, it will probably be the hardest thing you've ever done. I'm a demanding teacher, and I won't go easy on you just because you're working with me voluntarily. Maya nodded slowly. I understand. But I also promise you this, Elena continued. If you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to practice until your fingers hurt and study until your eyes burn, I will teach you everything I know. And, more importantly, I will help you develop that natural gift you have into something truly remarkable. Maya looked down at her hands, the same hands that Victoria had mocked for their calluses and rough skin. For the first time in a week, she tried to imagine them moving across piano keys again. When would we start? She asked quietly. Tomorrow morning if you're ready. 6 a.m. before your mother arrives for work. Practice room, 3B. Maya felt a flutter of excitement in her chest, the first positive emotion she had experienced since that horrible night. Okay, she whispered. Yes. Elena nodded approvingly. Good. But Maya, I need you to understand something. This path won't be easy. You'll have to work twice as hard as any of my regular students to catch up to their level of technical skill. Are you prepared for that? Maya thought about everything she had been through, all the dreams she had given up on in the past week. Then she thought about how it felt to create beautiful music, to lose herself in melodies that seemed to speak directly to her soul. Yes, she said, this time with more confidence. I'm ready. Elena smiled again. Then I'll see you tomorrow morning. And Maya? Don't let anyone steal your music again. What you have is too precious to give up. As Elena walked away, Maya stood in the empty hallway, hardly believing what had just happened. Maya's alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., cutting through the darkness of her small bedroom like a knife. For a moment she lay still, wondering if the conversation with Professor Volkov had been a dream. But as she became fully awake, she realized it was real and her stomach filled with nervous butterflies. She dressed quietly, trying not to wake her mother, and slipped out of their tiny apartment. The morning air was cold and crisp, and the streets were empty except for a few delivery trucks. Maya had never been out this early before, and the world felt different somehow, full of possibility and new beginnings. When she arrived at the conservatory, the building was dark except for a few security lights. Maya used her mother's key to enter through the service entrance, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. What if Professor Volkov had changed her mind? What if this whole thing was some kind of elaborate joke? But when Maya reached practice room 3B, Professor Volkov was already there, sitting at the piano with a stack of music books beside her. She looked up when Maya entered, and her serious expression softened slightly. Good morning, Maya. I'm glad you came. Good morning, Professor, Maya replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena stood up and gestured for Maya to sit at the piano bench. Before we begin playing, we need to work on your posture. The way you sit at the piano affects everything else. For the next hour, Elena completely deconstructed everything Maya thought she knew about playing piano. Her hand position was wrong, her posture was terrible, and her fingering was completely unconventional. Elena was patient but firm, correcting each mistake immediately. "Your wrists are too low," Elena said, gently adjusting Maya's hands. "And your shoulders are too tense. Playing piano should feel natural, not forced." Maya tried to make the corrections, but it felt incredibly awkward. After playing her own way for months, these proper techniques felt foreign and uncomfortable. "I know it feels strange now," Elena said, reading Maya's frustration. "But bad habits are much harder to break than to prevent. We're building a foundation that will support you for the rest of your musical life." They worked on basic scales next, simple patterns that Maya had never bothered to learn properly. Elena showed her the correct fingering for each scale, making Maya repeat them over and over until the movements became automatic. Music theory is just as important as physical technique, Elena explained as she pulled out a notebook filled with staff paper. "You need to understand why music works the way it does, not just how to play it." Maya stared at the page full of lines and symbols that might as well have been written in a foreign language. She had always played by ear, learning melodies from memory and figuring out harmonies through trial and error. "This is going to be the hardest part for you," Elena said honestly. "Learning to read music when you've been playing by ear for so long is like learning to read words when you've only been speaking." Elena was right. The music theory lessons were incredibly difficult. Maya struggled to understand the relationship between the notes on the page and the sounds she could create. She made mistake after mistake, becoming frustrated when simple exercises took her much longer than they should have. "I don't think I'm smart enough for this," Maya said after a particularly difficult lesson on chord progressions. "Intelligence has nothing to do with it," Elena replied firmly. "This is about practice and persistence. Every great musician has struggled with theory at some point." Elena showed Maya photographs and videos of famous pianists who had overcome similar challenges. She told stories of musicians who had started late, who had come from poor backgrounds, who had been told they would never succeed but had proven everyone wrong through sheer determination. "Your ear is actually an advantage," Elena explained. "Most of my students learn to read music before they develop good listening skills. You already understand how music should sound. Now we just need to teach you how to translate that understanding into technical skill." The weeks began to blur together. Maya's days developed a rigid routine. Up at 5:30 a.m. for 2 hours of practice with Elena, then regular school, then homework, then helping her mother at the conservatory, and finally more private practice late at night when everyone had gone home. Elena had given Maya a key to practice room 3B so she could work on her own. Maya would often practice until 10 or 11 p.m., her fingers aching and her mind exhausted from concentrating so intensely. Her hands, already tough from cleaning work, developed new calluses from the constant practice. Her fingertips became sore, and sometimes her wrists would ache from holding proper position for hours at a time. But Maya pushed through the discomfort, driven by a determination she didn't even know she possessed. Elena was demanding in ways Maya had never experienced. She corrected every small mistake, made Maya repeat difficult passages dozens of times, and refused to let her move on to new material until she had mastered what they were working on. "Good enough is not good enough," Elena would say when Maya wanted to move past a challenging section. "If you're going to do this, you're going to do it properly." Sometimes Maya felt like giving up. The work was exhausting, and she felt like she was making progress so slowly that she would never catch up to the other students. During her regular school hours, she was tired and distracted, struggling to keep up with her regular classes. Her mother began to notice that Maya was always exhausted and frequently absent-minded. "Are you feeling all right?" Lin Chen asked one evening. "You seem so tired lately." Maya wanted desperately to tell her mother about the lessons, but she and Elena had agreed to keep everything secret until Maya was ready to perform publicly. "I'm just working hard on my regular schoolwork," Maya said, hating herself for the lie. As winter turned to spring, Maya began to notice real improvements in her playing. The basic techniques that had felt so awkward in the beginning were becoming natural. She could read simple pieces of sheet music without too much difficulty, and her understanding of music theory was starting to click into place. Elena began introducing more challenging pieces, real classical compositions that required both technical skill and musical interpretation. Maya threw herself into each new piece with incredible intensity, practicing passages over and over, until they were perfect. "You have something that most of my regular students lack," Elena told her one morning as Maya finished playing a particularly difficult Bach invention flawlessly. "You practice with purpose. Every repetition is focused on improvement, not just getting through the motions." Maya felt a surge of pride at the compliment, but Elena wasn't finished. "However," Elena continued, "technique alone is not enough. The most important thing about music is the ability to move people emotionally. That's what I heard the first night I watched you play, and that's what we need to make sure you don't lose as you develop your technical skills." Elena began working, with Maya on interpretation, how to use dynamics, tempo changes, and phrasing to bring emotional depth to her playing. This was the part that came most naturally to Maya, and Elena was constantly amazed by her students' instinctive understanding of musical expression. "You feel the music," Elena observed. "Most students have to be taught how to add emotion to their playing, but for you, it's the opposite. I'm having to teach you how to control and focus the emotion that's already there." As spring progressed, Elena mentioned something that made Maya's heart skip a beat. "The annual spring showcase is coming up in 6 weeks. It's the most important event of the school year." Maya had heard other students talking about the spring showcase. It was when the conservatory's best students performed for an audience of influential musicians, critics, and wealthy patrons. Only the most advanced students were chosen to participate. "I think," Elena said carefully, "that you might be ready to perform." Maya stared at her teacher in shock. "Perform? In front of all those people?" "You've been working for 3 months now," Elena said. "Your technical skills have improved dramatically, and your natural musicality is stronger than ever. More importantly, I think it's time for people to see what real talent looks like." Maya felt a mixture of excitement and terror. The thought of performing in front of an audience was both thrilling and absolutely terrifying. "What would I play?" Maya asked. Elena smiled mysteriously. "I have something special in mind, but it will require you to push yourself harder than you ever have before. The piece I'm thinking of is more challenging than anything you've attempted so far." Maya took a deep breath. After everything she had been through, after all the hours of practice and study, she was ready for the next challenge. "What do I need to do?" she asked. Elena pulled out a piece of sheet music that made Maya's eyes widen. It was Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, one of the most technically demanding pieces in the classical piano repertoire. "This," Elena said, "is what you're going to play at the spring showcase." Maya looked at the complex notation covering multiple pages and felt overwhelmed. But then she remembered how impossible everything had seemed 3 months ago, and how far she had already come. "When do we start?" Maya asked, her voice steady and determined. The night of the spring showcase arrived with an electricity that seemed to fill every corner of Harmony Conservatory. Maya had been preparing for this moment for 6 weeks, practicing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 until she could play it in her sleep. But as she stood in the small dressing room backstage, her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Through the walls, she could hear the murmur of the audience gathering in the grand concert hall. Maya had never seen the hall filled before. Usually, she only saw it empty while she was cleaning. Tonight, it would be packed with music critics, wealthy donors, parents of students, and influential people from the classical music world. "Maya, are you ready?" Elena asked, entering the dressing room. She was wearing an elegant black dress and looked calm, but Maya could see concern in her eyes. "I don't think I can do this," Maya whispered, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She was still wearing her simple cleaning uniform, the same clothes she had worn every day while working at the conservatory. Elena had suggested this deliberately, wanting Maya to be authentically herself rather than trying to dress like the wealthy students. "You've played this piece perfectly dozens of times," Elena said gently, placing a reassuring hand on Maya's shoulder. "You know it better than you know your own name. But what if I make a mistake? What if I freeze up? What if everyone laughs like they did before?" Elena knelt down so she was at eye level with Maya. "Listen to me carefully. What happened with Victoria and her friends was cruel, but it doesn't define your worth as a musician. You have spent months working harder than any of my other students. You have earned your place on that stage." Maya took a shaky breath. "Why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself at risk for me? If I fail, it will reflect badly on you too." Elena was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Do you remember what I told you about my teacher in Russia? She saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. But there's something I didn't tell you about that story." Maya looked up, curious despite her nervousness. "When my teacher first suggested I audition for the Moscow Conservatory, I was terrified. I was just a village girl who had learned to play on a broken piano. I was convinced I would embarrass myself and disappoint her. But she told me something I've never forgotten." Elena paused, her eyes becoming distant with memory. She said, "Elena, talent is not about where you come from or how much money your family has. Talent is about having something important to say through music and having the courage to say it. You have something important to say, Maya. Tonight is your chance to say it." Maya felt some of her nervousness transform into determination. "What if they don't want to hear it?" "Then that's their loss," Elena said firmly. "But I have a feeling they will." The performance began at 8 p.m. sharp. Maya waited backstage as student after student took the stage, each one performing pieces that showcased years of expensive training and preparation. The applause was polite but not overwhelming. This was a sophisticated audience that had heard excellent student performances many times before. Victoria Sterling was scheduled to perform second to last, playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with the Conservatory's orchestra. As Maya listened from backstage, she had to admit that Victoria was technically excellent. Her performance was flawless, precise, and impressive in its complexity. The audience gave Victoria enthusiastic applause, and Maya could hear her taking her bows through the sound system. Victoria had always been considered the star of her class, and tonight's performance would only cement that reputation. Maya was scheduled to perform last, but most of the audience didn't know that. The official program listed all the regular student performances, but Elena had arranged for Maya's performance to be a surprise addition. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the voice of the conservatory's director over the sound system, "we have one final performance for you this evening. This piece will be performed by Maya Chen, under the instruction of Professor Elena Volkov." Maya heard confused murmuring from the audience. The name Maya Chen meant nothing to most of them, and some were probably wondering why they were being asked to sit through another student performance when the program had seemed complete. Elena squeezed Maya's hand. "Remember, you're not playing for them. You're playing for yourself, for the music, for every person who has ever been told they don't belong somewhere." Maya walked onto the stage, and the first thing that struck her was how bright the lights were. She could barely see the audience beyond the first few rows, which was actually a relief. The grand piano sat in the center of the stage like a beautiful black island, waiting for her. As Maya walked toward the piano, she heard whispers from the audience. Some people recognized her as the girl from Victoria's viral video. Others were confused by her simple clothing and obvious nervousness. A few people in the back row actually laughed when they realized who she was. Maya sat down at the piano bench and adjusted it to the proper height, just as Elena had taught her. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment, blocking out everything except the music that was about to flow through her. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 filled the concert hall, soft and introspective, like a question being asked in the darkness. Maya had practiced this beginning thousands of times, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, every note carried the weight of her entire journey. As the piece developed, Maya's nervousness began to fade away. The music took over, carrying her to that place where nothing existed except melody, harmony, and emotion. She played with the technical precision that Elena had drilled into her, but also with the raw passion that had always been her greatest strength. The audience, which had started the performance with skeptical whispers, gradually fell silent. This was not what they had expected. Yes, there were small technical imperfections that a trained ear could detect, but there was something else happening on stage, something that transcended perfect technique. Maya was telling a story through the music, and it was a story that everyone in the audience could understand. It was a story about struggle and hope, about dreams that seemed impossible but refused to die, about finding beauty in the midst of hardship. As the piece moved into its most technically demanding sections, Maya's months of grueling practice showed. Her fingers moved across the keys with increasing confidence and speed, navigating the complex passages that had once seemed impossible. But she never let the technical demands overshadow the emotional core of the music. In the audience, Victoria. Sterling sat with her mouth slightly open, unable to believe what she was hearing. This was the same girl she had humiliated months ago, the same girl whose video she had shared to mock and embarrass. But the person on stage now was transformed, commanding the attention of every person in the hall. As the piece reached its climactic moments, Maya poured everything she had into the music. Every hour of practice, every moment of doubt, every dream she had ever had about playing piano. It all flowed through her fingers and into the keys. The music filled the concert hall with such intensity that some people in the audience felt tears coming to their eyes. Maya played the final notes with perfect control, letting them ring out into the silence of the hall before slowly lifting her hands from the keys. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then, somewhere in the middle of the audience, one person began to clap, then another. Then suddenly the entire concert hall erupted in thunderous applause that seemed to shake the building itself. Maya sat at the piano, stunned by the response. People were standing now, giving her a standing ovation that went on and on. She could see faces in the front rows, and many of them had tears in their eyes. Elena appeared beside the piano, beaming with pride and gesturing for Maya to stand and take her bow. As Maya stood, the applause grew even louder. She had never experienced anything like this in her life. After what felt like several minutes, the applause finally began to die down. Maya started to leave the stage, but Elena held her back. Several people from the audience were approaching the stage, and Maya realized they wanted to speak with her. "Extraordinary," said a distinguished older man who introduced himself as a music critic from the city's major newspaper. "I've been reviewing classical performances for 20 years, and I've rarely heard such emotional depth from someone so young." A woman who turned out to be a talent scout from a major music conservatory pressed her business card into Maya's hand. "We need to talk," she said urgently. "I want to offer you a full scholarship to our program." More people gathered around, each one wanting to congratulate Maya or offer her opportunities. Record producers, concert promoters, teachers from prestigious schools. They all wanted to be part of whatever came next for this remarkable young musician. Through the crowd, Maya saw Victoria Sterling approaching hesitantly. Maya braced herself for more cruelty, but Victoria's expression was different now. Humble, ashamed, and genuinely apologetic. "Maya," Victoria said quietly, "I owe you a huge apology. What I did to you was terrible, and I was completely wrong about your abilities. You're incredible." Maya looked at Victoria for a long moment. A few months ago, she would have given anything to hear these words. Now they mattered less than she had expected.